Hey there, welcome to the 5,847,815th video on Project 2020. Yes, as the last person on Sports Card YouTube and possibly the planet to discuss this issue, I thought I'd take my crack at having some thoughts on Project 2020. And it's a bit of a mixed bag. I won't get too much into it, so if for some bizarre reason you've missed the other 5 million videos on this subject, and I'm only mildly exaggerating, Topps collaborated with 20 artists to take 20 of their, we'll call them all iconic, for the most part I think they are, 20 of their previous cards from Topps and put together their own spin. So each artist got to take a crack at all 20 cards. In total, the entire set will be 400 cards. It's a print-on-demand made to order. You go to Topps.com, you order it. And by the way, if you want to invest in Project 2020, let me give you a quick primer on how you can do that. You go to Topps.com, when the thing is on, you have 48 hours. You go, you hit buy it now, you put it in the cart, you fill in your information, you give your address to Topps, you send Topps your money, they send you the card. It's about 20 bucks per card, or you can buy a pair for 35. Outside of that, then you're paying secondary market prices, which is the reason this video exists. And it's the reason why anyone even cares to talk about it, because if people weren't buying them for the secondary price to go up, then really no one would care. Well, actually, that's not fair. It's not that no one would care, it's that it would be like Topps Now. And nobody is really taking time out of their day to talk about Topps Now. And even Topps Living set, which is a pretty cool set, I don't really think a lot of time is being devoted to that either. It would be in the same vein, but obviously since some of the cards have taken off, it's become a little bit more of a subject of discussion. And that's part of the reason I wanted to talk about it today, because I would have been pretty content to just leave it be. I've kind of observed it from afar, but I've been fascinated, I won't lie. I've been fascinated with the way that kind of the sports card community has reacted to it. And you kind of got two sides of the fence. And one of the funnest reads for me is, even though I'm not an active participant on Blowout forum, and by non-active participant I mean I literally just lurk, I never post anything because for the most part it's not my scene. I'm quite content to watch and observe though, and it's kind of fun to read the thread. Well, they got a long-standing thread, this one, and I'll put the name of it there. I think they basically compare, I think the title of it, the initial title from the beginning of the thing was comparing Project 2020 to being the worst set since 1991 Fleer. Well, first of all, I take offense to that. The yellow set has its charms, and more charms than some of the cards. But before I get into talking a little bit more about what I think about the set, I will make a couple of quick caveats that are extremely important before I say anything else whatsoever. Number one, art is subjective. It should seem obvious, but I'm going to make this clear at the beginning, because if someone wants to come and complain about me to the rest of it, I'm literally going to point them to the first couple of moments of this video where I say art is subjective. That means what I may like may not be what you like, and what you may like may not be what I like, and that's perfectly okay. And that's fine. Second thing is, one man's trash is another man's treasure, and if that sounds redundant with the first one, is because really I feel the need to repeat it because some people don't seem to understand this concept. With all that out of the way, my long story short, my thoughts on it are really simple. I think it's a decent idea. I think Topps has done clearly very well on it. I think it's been very interesting. But part of what prompted me to make a video about it is that we've passed an inflection point in my mind, because this week two things happened that were kind of notable. Number one, we had the Keith Shore Griffey Jr. card, which cracked 99,000. We'll call it 100,000 just, for rounding purposes, but virtually 100,000 copies in the print run. Now, if you go through kind of the history of the print run of this thing, and you can check that out on the Topps website. You don't have to take my word for it or anybody else's. In total, they came out to 99,177. And at the time of this video recording, that is the highest number. And now we've got a couple of cards past it. And the second thing that was kind of notable, again, part of the reason why I even cared to talk about it, is that I finally found a couple that I thought were interesting and worth picking up. So not to say, lest I be accused of being a complete hater on the cards, I'm not. I think if you like the cards, I think that's awesome. If you're collecting the cards and you're enjoying yourself, that's fantastic. And like I said, art is subjective and to each their own. And if you find something you like, well then by all means go for it. But my whole thing is, I'm not a big fan of purchasing any of these on the secondary market. Really, if I like one, I would rather just buy it directly from Topps while it's available. And I guess that's really, you don't really have a choice in the matter if you decide you're going to collect a specific player or if you're going to collect a specific artist whose style you like. And I guess that's really what it comes down to, is that some folks are doing a little bit of that and some folks are very clearly speculating. Now, the reason why I said the Griffey is kind of an inflection point is it makes it very interesting, because up until this point, the poster child of this has been the Mike Trout 2011 Topps traded card by Ermsy. This card. Now, this one is the poster child for a couple of reasons. One is, it has clearly come out as like the biggest card in terms of combination of player popularity and I guess the print run, and the combination of the two making this card absolutely explode in value. some recent comparables. I'm recording this on the 28th of May, and there was a $21.99 buy it now that was purchased, but it was best offer, so I haven't looked into the exact price that was actually accepted in best offer. But I can tell you that only a couple of days ago, on the 26th, there was a completed auction for $2,425. Now again, take that with a grain of salt. You can call shill bidding, you can do whatever you want. But I'm just giving you the numbers that I can see, and you can go to eBay and check it yourself. But the point is, obviously, to a certain degree, at least some of those sales have been completed. Some of those sales are legitimate, and clearly it's been a very popular card. Now, to say it's polarizing is a gross understatement. And the reason why I say the Griffey is an inflection point is because obviously the print run on that is so much higher than any other ones that preceded it. It's going to be interesting now how the market is going to respond to that going forward. Does that scare away the speculators? And the question really is, with 100,000 cards, is that a reflection of a lot of flippers all hitting it all at the same time, therefore increasing the the print run to an unforeseen rate? And then does that mean that there will be future ones that will crack six figures? Probably, but then the question becomes, what does that do to the secondary market value when the print runs are so much higher? Are there enough buyers in the market to absorb that? Now, before I get into the counter argument, one of the other things you got to kind of keep in mind is, and part and parcel of the popularity is going to be, are you interested in it for the art, or are you interested for the scarcity? And that's really where this one is going to be very interesting in terms of how the market reacts to it, and that's where I'm going to be very interested. But as far as if you're in it for the art, well, again, art is subjective. I already covered that. But you're going to have some very strong reaction both ways. I won't say right now what my thoughts are on that Ermsy Trout, but...
No. Look away, I'm hideous.
Now, I know what you're thinking. I used this whole video as a pretense in order to make that really badly done animation. And you'd be right. That thing is so ugly. So ugly. But again, art is subjective. That you may think that's the best looking one. I don't know why. I would check your prescription. But to each their own, I suppose. What I will say, though, is that I think there is a couple of cards for almost everyone and for almost every aesthetic taste. So again, the Ermsy is totally not my cup of tea, and it's not my alley in any way, shape, or form. I would probably rather throw acid into my eyes than have to look at it for more than a couple of minutes. But for other people, it may be tremendously interesting in terms of all the design and intricacies of it. And what I found most amusing is that the ones that I actually saw that were interesting enough to me to actually get me to spend some of my money on it were ones that when I did check the Blowout forum thread were considered by some people to be the most boring. And that's what I thought was great. And when I read that, I was thinking, okay, I'm on the right track, because I questioned some of these people's taste in art. I know that's going to sound like a shot, but I really mean it. Like, some of the cards they really think are pretty are like, oh my god, why? But I totally get why they may not be interested in the card that I'm interested in. So I'll talk about it a little bit more when it actually comes in hand. But just long story short, it's this one. And this one. And hopefully with editing I managed to put it in there, and probably they're still here, but we'll see how that turns out. The long story short, though, is I like kind of one of them is kind of a very simple design, and the other one is more of a classic design, which played off of the 54 Topps Ted Williams. So this card right here. Now, if you know anything about the 54 Topps, is that it's got three borders, and I've got a real 54 Topps here just for examples, real quick. So this is from Willie Puddinhead Jones. So what you can see there is it doesn't really have a top border. Now the thing is, with the design that the artist went with, and the artist is, let me get this right, Old Manilan, all together I guess, they kind of went for an aesthetic where they did a little more of a drawing style, but obviously digital art. But I'm a big fan of that kind of art anyway. And the thing that I always had an issue with the 54 Topps, I'm not a fan of 54 Topps, but I like the concept of it, and then changing the original 54 Topps style a little bit actually made it more aesthetically appealing to me. Even though it's very simple. Let's be clear, it's 100% simple, and it may not be somebody's cup of tea if they like the more busy example of it. But I'll just really quickly, just so we can look at this, and like I said, I'll spend more time on it later. Kind of the main idea of this, if I can get the focus, there you go. So you got the big head shot of the player, and then you got the action shot. But around it, you've got just this base color. And obviously the Ted Williams has a yellow, and this one's got kind of a baby blue. They got different variations of it, but I always thought it was kind of, I didn't like that space around it. I always liked the idea of more like, that's the reason why I like the 56 Topps with kind of the action shot, but with scenery around it, versus the 55 Topps, which has the two images, but again, you've got kind of a solid color. So that's why for me, that one is just more interesting. But again, I could totally see why somebody who really likes the crazy designs and a lot of things going on, why they would be more interested in that than kind of more of a classic looking baseball card. And the other one is just kind of a play off of the regular 55 Topps Koufax. So again, if you're not really into that, then I could totally see why that would be less interesting to you. But I think the most interesting thing about that is those are the next two that came after that Griffey. Although there was a little bit of a parallel times, which might have impacted the print runs. I won't spend too much more time talking about the print runs, but we'll get to the conclusion of this. But the 54 Williams came in at 41,407, which is still one of the highest print runs up until this point. The Griffey was certainly still the highest at this point, followed by the Ryan that came out with the Griffey, which was about 65,000, and then the Koufax has 43,147. So the point is, we're still looking at much higher numbers in terms of print runs than before. The reason why I said, though, this is kind of the tipping point one way or the other, is it means that either we're going to get decreasing print runs as you drive away some of those speculators, or you're going to get increasing print runs because now you've got a Jeter that's up right now, which could crack 100,000. And if that does, then the question becomes, do the future Jeters crack 100,000? Does the next Trout crack 100,000? And that's the part where I'm really interested. Because, like I said, it feels like it's an inflection point, but it's an inflection point one way or the other. Either we continue escalating the print runs up to where, who knows, sky's the limit, or does that draw out some of the money that already has invested a fair bit in there, and do they kind of, do they start pushing out the cards to reap in some of the profits before those print runs start coming back down? And then do the print runs equalize with the actual demand? Because the problem is with the Griffey, and this is why the nearly 100,000 was so interesting. If it's 50-50 investors and flippers versus collectors, that's still very impressive because it means you have 50,000 real collectors that were interested in the card, which is a really basic, kind of ugly looking card. Again, my subjective opinion. But at the same time, that'd be really encouraging in the sense that at least there's almost an even split. But if it's like 75% flippers and 25% collectors, that's not so great. And if it's 90% flippers and 10% collectors, well, that's still 10,000 collectors. That could be your core audience, but that still leaves 90,000 sitting around with potentially no buyer to take it in. Now, I don't want to spend all the time now talking about the whole argument and counter-argument. You've got literally 800 pages, or nearly 800 pages, of a forum thread, and I'll put the forum thread in the link in the video description. But the crux of it comes to, some people believe that this has cross appeal, not just sports fans, not just sports card fans, not just art fans, but kind of a broad mass appeal. Various news outlets are getting a hold of this, obviously, as the money that's exchanging hands is kind of notable. But on the other hand, is it because we're bored? Is it because right now there's the quarantine and, real sports isn't happening? There's no gambling. The same reason that we talk about the general sports card market potentially being on rocket fuel right now, is that also playing into this, where this is actually a much easier entry point for someone who's potentially looking to flip. Because at the very least, for that 48-hour period, you and everybody else have the exact same opportunity to buy the exact same item at the exact same price. And for arbitrage purposes, that's as good as it gets, because it means you got a flat cost. You can buy 10 of them, and I think they're $17.50 if you buy 10. But the point is that you can get 10 at a time, and then obviously you can stack that. But you can grab a whole bunch at a flat rate for that 48-hour period, and then as soon as that window shuts, nobody else can get in without paying some kind of a secondary market price. So even if all you're doing is doubling your money, well, that's just a money-making machine, as long as the gravy train keeps moving. The question is how long it's going to move, and then the subsequent question is there going to be any sticking power with those people buying, in terms of long-term, or are they just kind of doing it right now while they're bored? Because it is going to be a 400 card set, which is going to continue on through the rest of the year. And if live sports do come back, is that going to draw some of the attention away, and are they going to be interested again? But then again, if the print runs come down, that could help offset some of the loss of the potential buying audience. So this is why the whole thing becomes really interesting, and why I'll be interested in seeing going forward. But I also have gotten a big kick out of the amount of coverage it's gotten, the amount of people that have talked about it, and then of course the YouTube channels that basically sprung up out of nowhere specifically to talk about this phenomenon. It's been kind of fun to watch, and I look forward to continuing. I'm not really going to spend a lot of time talking about Project 2020 going forward, only if something happens that's kind of interesting, but I thought I would take some time in this video to talk about it, and also just have a little fun with that animation.
No. Look away, I'm hideous.
Alright, that's it for me. Enough silliness. Back with more regular videos coming up shortly, because tomorrow's Friday, so we'll be doing probably a pickup video, which will come out either on Friday or on Saturday. If for some reason you got any comments or questions, I'm more than happy to have a discussion on this. Again, art is subjective, so don't get too mad if I made fun of your favorite card. Like I said, it's not, there is actually a card for everyone, and I did buy a couple of the cards, at least the ones that appeal to me, which is perfectly okay. And if you find that most of them appeal to you, that's awesome. Doesn't mean I can't poke a little fun at it. Just the same, hope you're enjoying yourself, hope you're doing well wherever you are, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks.